Cloninger moves on in, and he scores! He's going to learn today.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Pod Street Bullies. My name is Derek.
You know, I'm the one that says, what's going on, everybody? You're not allowed to say, what's going on, everybody. That's what I say.
Well, you know what? This week, that's what I'm going to say.
I'm John.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Hello, everyone.
Glad you could finally introduce yourself. We can get through that bit real quick.
Sure.
Because we have another guest on the show today. We have Benjamin Melusky. Melusky, correct?
Melusky.
Okay, I've been mispronouncing it all these weeks with these questions and everything.
2 strikeouts. Oh,
I guess I should be like one of the Swedish players and tell you guys ahead of time how to pronounce it. It's either Lindblom, Melusky, right?
And then, like Grossman, you just change the spelling midway through your tenure with the Flyers, and everybody's like,
exactly.
What? But Ben, we're really glad to have you on. Ben won our contest, if you want to call it that, where we asked you guys a question on Monday after the last episode about the outcome of the Penguins game, according to Eric, who he was wrong. And we'll delve into that further. But Ben, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself here, my man.
Hey, Ben Melusky. I'm originally from Dover, Pennsylvania, not too far from York, Pennsylvania.
My man. I love it.
Know. Born and raised in Pennsylvania. Now I'm down in the South. I teach down at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, so I'm in Virginia.
Nice. A
Yeah,
college
so get up a little bit here and there. I got tickets to the Sens Flyers game on the I think it's the 6th of December, so that'll be the next I get up there.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Now,
nice. What do you teach, Ben?
I'm a political scientist, so I get to talk about all the fighting that happens in politics and talk about the fighting that happens on the ice, tw
Sweet.
No shortage of action on the ice and off the ice, really, when it comes to that. I'm surrounded by teachers. Jeez. Oh, I feel like I'm back in school. But anyways, guys, we've got game recaps. We've got some core issues. We've got some defensive issues we're going to get to. But we're going to kick off right now with the game recaps. And the first game of the week that we all had to sit through was the Penguins game. Ben, are there any positives that you can draw from this game?
I think Lindblom. I mean, he's about the only positive we had, right? I mean, he got a goal. I mean, he's booking. I mean, if you look at the Pens, I mean, like kind of what Guentzel has turned into for them. I mean, he is this diamond in the rough, and we need to lock him down now. He is on a streak, and he is going to be basically sucking up Patrick's contract at the end of the season, possibly.
It works out, though. I mean, because if Patrick's not going to play much this year, considering his migraines, might give us a little more money to work with when it comes to Lindblom, and we might need it. And I guess we could go through the negatives here because there were just so many. I mean, what were you least impressed with?
I think just the energy. I mean, you would think coming out of that Columbus game, they would have been against, division state rival. I mean, it should have been a playoff game for them. And they came out flat-footed. I mean, we talk about them starting games off slow. They played the entire game slow. It was bad. I mean, every time there was a turnover, every time the Pens exited the zone, I mean, they were 2 steps behind them. There was little pressure on back-checking. I mean, and pretty much every time the Pens exited the zone, it was a 2-on-1. It was bad.
Yeah, you're right. Slow starts. I mean, how many times have we sat here and complained about the slow starts? And not much recently because they've gotten off to some big starts and some fast starts. But when you think about in seasons past, I mean, that was the crux for the Flyers. It was just terrible. And we always sat here and pissed and moaned about it. That's just, that's the fact of the matter.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and it didn't help that I think the worst part of the game, was the mismatching between the fourth line and the Pens' first line. I mean, the Vorobiev line was constantly out there on the ice against Crosby, and it was rightly so. They were putting him out there. The Pens were putting him out there. And I think, that really put the nail in the coffin for Vorobiev, his chance with the big club. I mean, and so many times just turnovers in neutral zone. And arguably it led to Crosby, the 4th goal for Crosby, giving him his 100th point against the Flyers. Go figure, right?
Oh, that man is a menace.
You know what I have to say about this game? Nothing. Let's move on to the next one. Ben, let's talk about the New Jersey game. I mean, Another rival. I mean, I guess you wouldn't really call it Pittsburgh, but there's still a team that we love to beat up on. And this game just completely was different than that joke of a game on Tuesday. So what was your big takeaway from Tuesday's game?
I think we looked better. I mean, so Hart, after 2 bad weeks, got back in net, made 23 saves. It was kind of one of those matchups that I think, like you said, they're not quite the rival we think they are, but we have some of these kind of analogs. I mean, it was the Hart versus Blackwood show, right? Everybody was saying at the end of last season, is Blackwood, as good as Hart? Is Hart overrated? And so, arguably going in, their records were fairly close, right?
Right.
But Hart, I think, his angles were better that night. He made some pretty athletic saves here and there when he was tasked with it. But Hart looked good. The power play still not quite there, but at least the penalty kill was moving along. And I think our defense was starting to get back into rhythm. That was, I think, the other big takeaway is that the Columbus and Pittsburgh games, up until then, the defense has been looking good, and then you go into Columbus and Pittsburgh, and they're literally falling on their face. I mean, that was the Pens game was game 1 of Sanheim falling down, leading to a goal. This, sadly, was game 2 of Sanheim versus Gravity, and Gravity was, there.
And it would not end there either. But, I mean, to go back to Hart, too, and maybe for this entire team, like, this was a game that he needed to have. I mean, it was against, inferior competition, a team that's been struggling out the gate. If he pooped the bed on this one, it really would have done a number on him. So this was just a game that he needed to have. Derek, is there anything that you wanted to add about this game?
You guys touched on it all. I think it was really encouraging seeing Carter Hart not necessarily return to form, but look much better than he had in the previous few games that he played in. It's the right step in the right direction, and I'd still like to see a little more, obviously, but at the same rate, I'm very encouraged by that game, especially in the shutout. He was great in the shutout, aside from the one from Palmieri that rang off the post, but he made some great saves. The one on Hughes, I believe it was Hughes, or was it Heischer? Fantastic. That's what I like to see. So long, we've wanted a goalie that was good in the shootout because they've all sucked. And now it seems like Hart can at least hold his own in the shootout.
And we won a shootout.
Yes.
That doesn't happen ever.
Right. I mean, Coots doing the Forsbergian type dangle and goal. I mean, it was a thing of beauty there.
Oh, inject it in my veins.
You know what annoys me, though, about watching a shootout? And I can't remember if it was Giroux or Voracek, but sometimes, and I think it's because they miss, but sometimes it looks like there's no effort there. And I know that there is, and they're thinking through it, so I'm not necessarily knocking their actual effort, but just like watching it, it just looks like they kind of skate in and throw it at the goalie and... Dude, what are you doing?
I mean, you watched Jake. I mean, Jake has the same move, and that's what bothers me. I mean, it's 2 dekes and a shot, and every goalie knows that's Jake's move. He did it the next night as well, and I mean, which is weird given that he's I think like number 2 on our team in terms of shootout percentages.
Goalies seem to have him figured out. Like that wrist shot isn't as quick as it used to be, so they anticipate it now, and it's like they know it's coming off his stick. So I think it's time for Jake to mix things up a bit. Giroux, I feel like, tries to do way too much as he gets closer into the net. Right. It's like, dude, do what you did against Toronto years back and just shelf it. What was that, the Pavel Datsyuk move? Where he's on the line and just right behind him wrists it right up over the goalie's shoulders.
You bring up a good point, though. It's like he takes too long to think about what he's going to do, and when the execution comes, it's almost too late.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if he tries to come in with speed, it usually he's doing 4 or 5 moves, and it goes off the stick, and he can't even get it on net sometimes.
Right. You know what I'd like to see? Someone do like a Wayne Simmons move. I guess, it was a year or 2 ago against Ottawa, I think it was. Literally, it's just like deke, 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 and then shoots. Like, he deked maybe 7 times right in on net, and then just boink, right in. I was like,
I would like to see like some good old fashioned Mighty Ducks here, skate the charge the net, snow the goalie, and fire.
The triple deke, Right.
I think the one thing from this game we can't forget is there's 2 things. One is Farabee getting his first goal. I mean, I think that his first non-disallowed goal. Let's put it that way, right?
The first one that actually counts, quote unquote, on the score sheet.
Good one too. I loved it.
It was a thing of beauty, and I think there's lots more to come there. And then on top of that, I mean, we had some kids come up, right? I mean, we had Myers, the Germ, Terwinski finally coming up. Vorobiev had his chance, got sent down, and somehow Moran is also sent down on a conditioning stint too.
Right.
Hey, it's the nature of the beast, I guess. You got to say that.
Can I take a minute to talk about German Rube stuff?
Oh, please tell us more, John.
So, I mean, I don't know if anybody read this piece, but I'm doing this new thing. Well, it's kind of like an old thing, but I'm rebooting it, I guess, where I'm focusing in on a prospect and a game that they play and kind of talking about, you know, how they're used, what they do, how they look, you know, offensively, defensively, physically, the whole shebang. I'm calling it Under the Flyers Microscope. And I figured with Rubstov making his debut, it was a great idea to do his game, his NHL debut, and there was nothing really to write about. Now, I understand that, you know, in his first game, his usage is going to be a little less, but he's the kind of player where I think you're really wasting his development on the fourth line. He's somebody that really either needs to be in a third line or greater role and really taking some ice time. I mean, if you look at what he was doing against New Jersey, they were irrelevant minutes. They'd come out, go down in the offensive zone once, and then boom, they were off. And if that's what we're going to be using Rubstov for, you're better off having somebody else take that role. I mean, what did he do that Andrioff can't do?
He played 8 minutes against New Jersey, and then he played almost 7 minutes against Toronto. It's like, to your point, John, you're absolutely correct. He could be doing much more with more minutes in Lehigh Valley than he's doing right now with essentially fourth line minutes up with Philadelphia.
Right.
It's kind of like when they brought up Nicolas Aube-Kubel last season. And, I mean, obviously we're talking apples to oranges and coaches here. But at the same time, these are kids with high ceilings, but we're not putting them in a position to really succeed.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
Very
see,
good
that's
point.
the problem. Because if Rubstov is then put in a fourth line and all we're seeing is these limited minutes, eventually the coaches are only going to have that to base it off of. And if he just becomes that guy that you're going to layer, you've really reduced his ceiling moving. And he's so much more than a fourth liner.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. Well, if we're going to move on to the last game of the week, which happened last night, this is Sunday night, so it happened Saturday, against Toronto. Another shootout. And this time we came out on the wrong end of the score sheet. Flyers lost 4-3 to Toronto. Positives that you can draw from this game, Ben?
Well, first and foremost, it was a fun game. I mean, I think that's the difference between this season and last season. Despite the fact that we've had some pretty terrible blowouts and things like that, this game was fun. I mean, watching G actually drive the net and really fake the other team out. They thought he was just going to pass, and, you know, he drove it to the net, five-holed it, and it was just a thing of beauty, right?
Yeah.
The power play is rolling along. Going into this game, I think we were 0-10 on the power play. So the power play, you know, actually was moving along. Beyond that, it was kind of fun to watch Hack coming back to town and listening to the announcers talk about the fact that, you know, Hackstall's in charge of the defense and their penalty kill, and arguably the Leafs were on the PK a good bit of the game, and their defense was abysmal. It's kind of fitting that Hack has been in charge of that. So that was kind of fun to watch.
How much do you think Hack was in Dubas's ear? Like, hey, guess who's still out on the market? Andrew McDonald and Brandon Manning. Like, we can get both of them.
Somebody call Vandevelde.
Oh, God.
Well, the thing I love about this game was, so obviously Sanheim had his third fall in as many games, right?
Which led to a goal.
Right. Which led to another goal, right? And if this was Hack back in the day, right, that type of usage or that type of play would have relegated Hawks, and Manning would have been in the lineup, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, Manning or somebody else. But you listen to Vigneault after the fact, and he said, "Look, you just got to let these kids play through it. I mean, they've got high ceilings. We have to show our trust in them. And I mean, we did. This was Sanheim. This is Hart. This is any of the kids. They're going to struggle, and they have to be able to just play through it.
I love that mentality.
And know that their coach has their back and is going to allow them to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
This is the one thing, I think the biggest thing that separates Vigneault from Hackstall, because Hackstall's leash was short. Vigneault allows these kids to go out, earn their bumps, you know, play their game, and work through it. And I think that's much more beneficial than the first time someone screws up, boom, you're out of the lineup. Like, that's, you know, that there's a bit more leniency.
For sure.
Yeah.
It is interesting to watch with Jake though. Is he's been relegated. I mean, he kind of is in the doghouse. He's been relegated to the third line. His minutes have been cut. Farabee, taking that top line's position, and I mean, rightly so. I mean, it's becoming a meritocracy here, and I think that's the Vigneault way, is that you play well, and you get rewarded.
Again,
right. I mean, I love it. Yep, he's holding the veterans accountable too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He's allowing the kids to make some mistakes and, giving them some leash, but at the same time, he recognizes the people who shouldn't be making those mistakes or should be playing better, and he's not, just letting them get away with it.
And I think we're seeing that really play out. I mean, Provorov was a beast last game. I mean, he's booking 27, 26 minutes a night, getting that power play goal, and then arguably getting put into the shootout, which is just hilarious. That's his first shootout attempt since juniors, he said.
Well, that's what happens when you go through 67 rounds of it.
Right. Second longest in franchise history, and I think for the Leafs, that was the longest in their franchise history.
Yeah, at that point, it's just like you wish you could just send the same guy out over and over again.
Exactly. But, I mean, TK, you talk about, giving the kids a chance here. I mean, he's 0 for 8, and, they waited until some of the later rounds to give TK a chance, but what happens when you throw him in? He gets the only goal there for him.
Right.
Okay. Now, if you could surmise these 3 games into just one quick little tidbit about, like, what, I guess, you've observed and the biggest thing, I guess, to come away from these games, how would you put it?
It's like going to the old country buffet. There's a whole lot of stuff up there you don't want to eat. There's some stuff that's okay and some that's just kind of mad. And that's kind of how the week's been. It's been like a trip to the old country buffet.
That's fantastic.
I
love that.
That was perfectly put. I have nothing else to add, and I think this is the perfect time to say, Ben, thank you so much for coming on, recapping these games with us, brother. We really appreciate it. Anything else? If people want to find you on Twitter, where can they find you at?
Benjamin.Melusky on Twitter. I'm kind of a Flyers brain trust guy. I just throw random comments up there and usually kind of sarcastically throwing some stats up as well, too. So look me up.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, man. We really appreciate it.
Yeah,
look forward
thanks
to
for coming
who
on.
else you bring on in the coming weeks.
Definitely.
All right, take care.
All right, have a good one, guys.
Wow, that went like so much better than I thought.
Oh, me too, man.
And nothing against
impressed.
Ben.
He should probably take my job.
I was going to tell him to take mine, honestly.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell him to take mine too.
Well, no, I think you're a little bit better at this than I am, but
probably.
Just call me Travis Sanheim. We'll work through it. But
right. No, that was fun. I mean, thanks again to Ben for coming on. You never know when you do these contest things.
Yeah.
And like I was telling my wife what our idea was, and she was like, "Really?" Hey, first time worked out great.
Yeah, it was awesome. But now we get down to the duo, and what we're going to discuss today, and what we're leading off with is, again, the defense. We're going to talk about everything just as a whole, and then we're going to kind of break it down player by player and figure out, really, to put it in its simplest form, what's going on. Because something's wrong. Am I right, John?
Yep. Oh, 100%, man. I mean, they're a liability as a group.
Yeah, we've seen it. I mean, they gave up 7 goals against Pittsburgh. They gave up how many goals? 4 goals against Columbus. Not terrible, but,
No.
Then they give up, 3 goals in consecutive games to New Jersey and to Toronto, which, again, not terrible, but still. What are we supposed to make of this?
Well, I mean, defense has been a problem for this team for a really long time. And Fletcher came in and made the moves that he thought was necessary to kind of give this defense a boost. So far, when we're talking about the unit itself, we're not really seeing much of an improvement. And I feel like one of the things that's really frustrating me is they aren't doing themselves any favors with these stupid turnovers.
Oh.
I mean, there'll be moments where they're playing decent enough defense where they're not, I'm probably saying this word a bunch of times during this segment, but a liability. And then they just forget how to play. And there's a stupid pass, or there's a pass in an area that shouldn't be made, or they forget how to skate. Sorry, Sanheim, or they forget how to handle the puck. And the next thing you know, the opposition has a great scoring chance. And especially whenever you have a young goaltender, that can't be happening.
No. Absolutely not. And especially a young, struggling goaltender. I mean,
Right.
you need to do everything in your power to make sure that the pucks that he might not be able to see get blocked.
And yeah, keep going. Sorry.
That was me literally just going to continue rambling about nothing, but you.
Well, I mean, I know we're really going to be talking about the defensemen, but team defense has not been great. Like, even the forwards and their defensive roles have not been great. I mean, even last night, I can't remember which goal it was. I want to say it was the Marner goal, but I might be wrong, so don't quote me on that, people. But if you watch that carefully, Sean Couturier realizes a scoring chance is going to be happening. And I think it's Marner who comes around the net, right?
I believe so.
And instead of like speeding to kind of get into position to make that difficult, it almost looks like Couturier is like just kind of like back on his skates, like nonchalantly getting to the area, and Marner beats him. Now, maybe that's not necessarily Couturier's role, even though I think it is at that point. He did not get there. And when you have kind of a lackadaisical, and the last thing I want to call Sean Couturier is lackadaisical, but when you have the lackadaisical effort from the forwards defensively, that's not helping either.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And I think if we're going to kind of flip it a little bit and talk a bit about the positives, I am encouraged by the fact that these past 2 games, Provorov has not had a single giveaway.
Right.
According to the stat sheet that I'm looking at right now, he has 9 giveaways in 13 games, which last year and the year before, over the course of 82 games, he had 92 giveaways.
Right.
During the entire year, both seasons. So he's averaging over a giveaway a game. Sitting at 9 through 13 games is progress. And I think he's being safer with the puck. And much like we talked about when we were previewing the defense before the year started, I think we both said if we have Niskanen and Provorov as a pairing, Niskanen is going to rub off on Provorov and teach him to be a little bit more secure with that puck, making smarter decisions, protecting it, making sure that he's not just giving it away. And it seems to be working.
Yeah. I mean, what I see with these numbers is 9 giveaways. Yeah, it's still something that you want to reduce, but he's at least realized that this is a problem he needs to address. Mm-hmm. And you kind of mentioned this before too. He's just being a lot more disciplined with all his decisions too. He's not making as many bonehead moves. He's just being a lot more smarter with the puck.
You're right. It's really encouraging to see. If we're going to talk about not being so secure with the puck, which defenseman comes to mind for you?
Well, I'm looking at these numbers you gave me, and I guess it doesn't really match up, but Shane Gostisbehere, to me. Maybe we could just start with him, just talking about him, because I have the biggest problem with him right now. I don't know what we expect from Gostisbehere. I don't know if those are realistic expectations anymore. He's almost like a utility player. Like, he's only good for one thing these days, and he's such a liability. There you go. Someone better start counting it, because I'm saying it again. He's such a liability defensively. It's like, why even put him out there at this point?
Yeah. It's so frustrating watching him because everybody wants to harp on, it was 2-3 seasons ago where he had 65 points. It's been a while since then. It has been, but when he flashes that potential, it's there. So it's like, where is it going wrong? What's not clicking with him so that he can get back to that offensive mindset? But also, his defense has never been phenomenal, but at least it was passable and it was decent enough that scoring 65 points obviously made up for some of his shortcomings.
Well, that's the thing too, man. Like, he has to score 65 plus points to make up for how bad his defense is.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're putting in 65, but you're responsible for the opposition recording 120, right? It doesn't really, equal itself out. But I think at this point, he's just gotten into his own head.
Mm-hmm. After the stuff with last year, Hackstall being very vocal, kind of calling him out and him feeling the pressure, and now he's got a fresh slate with Vigneault, but this isn't the way we expected him to respond.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, but like you have to think about, you're in constant trade talks, like all off season, right? People are talking about trading you. And I do think at one point, right, we viewed Gostisbehere as our number one defenseman.
Oh, absolutely.
And the reality is, thank God he's not. But as these younger kids start to come up and kind of take away from your role, that also takes a toll on you too. And I think that pressure sometimes can be an evil son of a gun, and he's just not answering to the call at this point.
You think it's the fact that he's not strong enough in the head to, and I don't mean that with any type of disrespect. Like, I don't want you to take it that way, calling me, me calling him mentally soft. Like, I don't want you to take it that way. But, like, is he just not able to mentally respond and be able to take that as a constructive criticism, if you will?
I'd love to say that he is a lot more strong mentally than what he's showing, but he's not showing me any different at this point.
Yeah.
Is that a good enough answer?
No, absolutely, yeah. I'm following in the same line as you right there. So if we're not going to shoulder Gostisbehere with all the blame for the way this defense has performed, who's your number 2 scapegoat on the blue line?
Well, Justin Braun. I mean, he's supposed to be a defensive defenseman, and what the hell's this guy doing?
-10 on the year.
Phew.
Through 13 games. Not the preseason Justin Braun we saw.
Right. I mean, and he was brought in to be a defensive defenseman, right? I'm not making that up.
Mm-mm.
He just was, and like he chewed up some minutes too, which is pretty good. But like, I don't know what the hell happened to this guy.
Yeah, I mean, he's soaking up about 17 and a half minutes a game this year on average. And to show for it, he's got 3 assists, which not bad for a defensive defenseman through 13 games, but man, like some people will harp like, oh, plus minus isn't really that great of a stat to go by, and they even talked about it on the Flyers broadcast the other night, but it's much like you've always said, I'd rather be a +10 than a -10.
Right, when you start to get into those double digits, it's a little different.
Yeah, and that number fluctuates throughout the year, so
right
early on, maybe he gets out of this funk, if you want to call it that, but it's still not that encouraging.
Well, the thing is, too, is you can look at that -10 and then watch him play and then go, oh, yeah, that number makes sense.
You're right.
I mean, it kind of makes sense for how he's playing, that plus-minus number is as crappy as it is.
Yeah, and much like I used to discuss, and I still somewhat believe this, I originally thought that Braun was brought in to be kind of a gatekeeper for 1 year. And then that would give way to a guy like Sam Morin, who plays much similar style as Braun.
Right.
And we've seen Morin in 1 game this year. Not very impressive. Didn't stand out. Not terrible. I'm not going to sit here and say he was detrimental to the team's efforts there. But, what if neither of these guys work out and we're set to go out for a defenseman in free agency next year?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have to at some point. We're not very deep here, even with quality prospects. I mean, Cam York at this point, there's still a lot of NCAA season left, but I don't know if he's a one-and-done kind of guy at this point. I think 2 years in Michigan would be good for him. And there's nobody in Lehigh Valley right now.
Yeah. I mean,
as far as prospect-wise that you're like can come in.
Yeah. And if he earns a contract next year, you've got a guy like Wyatt Wiley. You also have Yegor Zamula, who's coming up to play with Lehigh Valley, presumably.
Yeah, he will.
Neither of those really fit that sound. I mean, you could argue Wiley maybe. Zamula's more of an offensive defenseman, obviously.
Well, so is Wiley, though.
Yeah. Now, and the limited amount of research that I've done into Wyatt Wiley is that his defensive game has rounded out a bit, and it's much better from when he started with Everett, but still a little more to be desired. Any of those guys realistically could push for a spot next year that Justin Braun's filling right now?
Not really. I mean, not unless something changes drastically. I don't see it.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, the idea of the defensive defenseman isn't necessarily a necessity these days. You know, if you could have 6 defensemen in your lineup that could produce some sort of offense, that's what you want.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's really nobody internally right now that I could say would come in and fill that role. It's going to have to be another, free agent signing.
And I'm not savvy on who the free agents are set to be at the end of the year, but I can only assume that if we're going to want a real quality one, we're going to have to spend some money, and that might not be a luxury that we have.
Right, exactly. I mean, and the whole problem here too, man, is like this guy came in to fill a role for right now, and he's only here for 1 year, and it's not working out. So what do you do? Obviously you want to wait a little bit because it's still really early in the season. But if he's not working, and then you have Robert Haig, who's just being Robert Haig, it's like you need to have some sort of answer to this.
Yeah, that's Iron Man Bobby Haig to you.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry.
But Iron Man Bobby Haig is slotting in and out of that lineup right now.
Right.
Is his time coming to an end with the Flyers now that Phil Myers is up with them?
I want to say yes, but you never know at this point, man. I would think so.
Yeah, the way this roster's fluctuated, nothing's set in stone at this point.
Yeah, I still don't think he's going to get traded.
No, I don't believe so either.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's going to want to even give like a late round pick for him.
Yeah, but the role he's in right now as the 6th to 7th defenseman, I think it's a perfect role for him.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And really, there's nothing more to add about Robert Haig.
Nope.
So we move on to let's go Travis Sanheim next. Let's kind of work our way from the bottom to the top here. Sanheim, like Ben put earlier in the show, fighting gravity a little bit lately.
Yeah, it's crazy to see it just continuing to happen.
Yeah, like that. This isn't the Sanheim that we're used to. That's real, flight of feet, and he's very savvy on his skates. I'm not used to seeing this.
I mean, is he trying to do too much? Like, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a skating expert, but it's not looking good.
No, yeah. I think that he's another defenseman with great offensive upside and potential, but, he's another two-way guy. He's not going to make it in the NHL just being good at offense. I think that there's something with his defense, big body as well. He's not going to be your shutdown guy, but he's also not going to be too much of a risk on the blue line.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I'm willing to kind of just hold off on the, panicking or criticizing him too much. He's still young. He's still growing. As long as it doesn't turn into like a 5, 6, 7 game streak of him falling down and then costing us a goal.
Yeah, you're right. I think he'll, pun intended, find his footing. But, it's just a little discouraging seeing that kind of stuff out of Sanheim.
Of course. Well, it's the same thing as like Carter Hart. You see such a good thing the season before. It sucks when these guys hit some hiccups.
Yeah, of course. And I guess I'll lump these two together because they've only played a handful of games here. But Phil Myers, Sam Morin, we touched on Morin a bit. We touched on Myers a little bit as well. I know who you're going to take if we're going to slide one into the lineup over the other.
Right.
Is it that,
Phil Myers?
Of course. Is it that big of a gap? Like, is Sam Morin just not ready for the NHL, or is it the fact that he's been sitting all year and hasn't really gotten to play much?
I think the problem is that we just continue to show Sam Morin, and we have no idea what we want to do with Sam Morin. How can this guy have any confidence, right, when the team seems so hesitant to put him in the lineup?
You're right.
I really feel like Fletcher just thinks he's an asset that he was kind of stuck with and doesn't want to just make it seem like he's completely given up on him, but has no interest in him.
Yeah, it's a guy that he didn't draft. Probably, I'm sure obviously he's done his homework on him, but not to the point where Hextall did. it's tough to find a spot in the lineup for a guy like this who hasn't necessarily rounded his game out yet, but it's because of the injuries. It's because of the inconsistent, stretches where he plays one game and then sits out 3 and then gets sent back down, plays a handful of games there, gets called back up, whatever it may be. There's been no consistency to the lineups that he's been in, and for a short amount of time, albeit.
Right.
Yeah. So we're taking Phil Myers over Sam Morin here.
I mean, honestly, before we move on from Morin, we have to trade him. We have to trade him before any sort of deficiencies to his game are too exposed. Like, this is the perfect. Let's trade a defensive prospect who was a former first rounder who hasn't had an opportunity to prove himself for a former first round prospect who's a forward who hasn't had a chance to prove himself. Like, just find that guy out there, the team that's willing to do it, and trade him, because I don't think he's a part of this team's future.
But is his value relative to the value of a forward that hasn't had a chance to prove himself? Like, our team's going to value Morin like that.
If that team values that guy the way we value Morin.
Okay, so
like, but a name I'll give, and this guy's a head case, but he's just the first name that comes to mind, Joshua Hosang.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, somebody who just is completely out of favor with the organization he's in. Nobody else is going to spend a lot on him because he's a head case, and he hasn't really proven to be anything more than a head case, a skilled head case, but a head case nonetheless.
What if they swap defensive prospects? What if they kick the tires on a guy like Ryan Merkley, who, much like Hosang, is a bit of a head case? Is that a risk that they'd be willing to take on?
I mean, it's a risk that the Flyers should certainly take on, but I don't think that San Jose would swap Ryan Merkley for Sam Morin, because at this point, Merkley hasn't had an opportunity in the pros yet.
True. Okay, just throwing the names out there, but
you know what I mean, though? Like,
yeah,
there's a lot of potential with that Merkley kid. In the few games I saw him play with London, the guy, I mean, his offensive ability is amazing. So, San Jose, if they were going to trade him, would definitely ask for much more than Morin.
True. Very true. So we move on down the blue line a bit more to Matt Niskanen. Another guy Fletcher brought in this year, another Minnesota guy. But he's kind of, the way he was billed, he's been. I think that as a veteran, as a do-it-all type of guy, Niskanen has lived up to what he's been billed as. And I love the fact that he's mastered the starfish move that McDonald couldn't. It just gives us another weapon in the arsenal, But,
yep.
Yeah, there's some deficiencies in his game. He's getting older. Might be, I won't say he's a step behind, but, he's not as, sprightly as he used to be. We'll call it that.
Right.
Any grievances with Niskanen so far?
No, and I actually think that he brings a good veteran presence. He's a leader.
Yeah.
And there's times where there's people that have been on this team for years that aren't showing the fight that this guy is. So I'm all for him. I mean, yeah, could he be playing better? Of course he could. Everybody could be, but no, I'm happy with it so far.
I mean, 6 points in 13 games as a defenseman is pretty decent.
Right.
And as far as veteran leadership goes, the guy was one of the leaders on the blue line with Pittsburgh when they won a cup. He was one of the leaders on the Caps blue line when they won a cup 2 years ago. What more could you want? I mean, if you're looking to bring a cup to Philadelphia, that's the kind of defenseman that you want to bring on.
Exactly.
And so we get to the top. Ivan Provorov. We've discussed him a little bit earlier. I mean, I'm liking what I'm seeing out of him so far. And the fact that he was terrible last year. We'll put it that. And he's on pace to shatter his points totals from last year, which is great. I love it. I think that's phenomenal.
Right.
Still a little rough around the edges. Not nearly as rough as last year again. But what are you most encouraged by that you've seen so far from Provorov?
Well, he's doing what I wish Gossesbeer would be doing. He had a crap year and he's turning it around. I mean, he's the turnovers are less. We've already talked about that. He hasn't given up on his offensive game. He's proving that he's an asset offensively. And I just think that now he's kind of back on that right path.
He's got the third most block shots of all the blue liners the Flyers have, behind Hagen Braun, which you'd expect that from defensive defensemen. He's got, let's see here, 10 hits, which awesome, great, cool. Hits are hits. They're great,
right.
if done correctly. He's that all-around defenseman the Flyers need. He's logging big minutes. He's averaging over 24 minutes a night. And he plays in all situations. I'm not crazy about him being the power play guy, but It is what it is. He's putting up the points for it, so, why not?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, I'm happy with it at this point. I don't want to try to pick him apart because I was kind of hard on him over the offseason. It's okay. You could shake your head. It's all right. Go ahead, take a minute.
Get Ben back on here. You take a breather here. We're gonna put your backup cap on.
But yeah,
you're right. Yeah, I absolutely agree. If we're going to progress along here, we've got a core to discuss.
Sure.
And first, we need to define that core. You could throw names out there like this guy, that guy, yada yada yada. But who exactly is the core made up of in Philadelphia?
Well, it's interesting, and we kind of said this a little off air. It really depends on what you're basing your conversation on, because there's a bigger core that this team it's like the foundation of this team. But then when you talk about guys where it's like we might need to shake things up, who's a core member that we might trade, that list is a lot smaller. So when I think of the core, you obviously think of guys like Giroux and Voracek and Couturier. Maybe you even want to say somebody like Ghost because he's been around a little bit longer. New guys who are showing promise like Konechny, Lindblom. I don't know how crazy people want to get. Did I say Couturier already?
You did. I'd even argue at least Provorov, because this is his fourth year.
Right,
yeah.
JVR you might throw in there. But then when you're talking about people who could actually get traded, you're not going to go and trade Konechny. You're not going to go and trade Provorov. No. If you think that Hayes is a part of this core, you're not going to trade Hayes. I'd even argue at this point, it's only his second year in Philadelphia. Well, the second time around, maybe JVR is not the guy you go shake it up. That core becomes a lot smaller.
Yeah.
And to me, it's three names. And the third one is, I don't really know if he's a core member, but I think it would shake things up. And those three names are Drew, Voracek, and Ghost.
That could potentially be on the market.
Yeah.
Okay.
If we were looking for a deal, I'm not saying that any of them should be, but if we were looking at a deal to quote unquote shake things up, we need to change the core, the identity of this team. Those would be the players, I think, that would be on the market to make that happen.
Now let's take a step back, because we'll get to that too, how we could potentially repair this, you want to call it broken core. The struggles recently, we've seen them give up 7 goals to the Penguins. We've seen them, it was a great comeback against Columbus, but they fell down early. Is it solely on the shoulders of those core members, these struggles that the Flyers are having?
Absolutely not. But, you need to look at it this way. There's been problems. We got a new GM.
Mm-hmm.
We got a new coach. So then you look at the players. And when you're looking at the players, you have to look at the people who were around through most of the struggles and start to view those as like constants. The ones that, they were struggling with, under this and under that. And now we've got this going on, and there's still a struggle. So although they're not the only people to blame, they're going to get a lot of the blame, because it's like, man, you can't turn it around even when we did all this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's an interesting time of year to discuss this, because it is so early on. But when you look at scoring, you look at the stat sheets, your top 3 scorers right now are Konechny, Lindblom, and Voracek. Voracek being a big part of that core because he's been here for so long, been a very consistent contributor. Konechny is showing that type of promise. Lindblom, in the short amount of time that he's been here, is now showing that as well because 11 points in 13 games, 7 of them being goals, which is something that the Flyers have desperately needed, these goal scorers. It's very encouraging. Shortly after Voracek, you have you have Couturier and then Provorov, and then Giroux, Hayes, Raffl, Van Riemsdyk, yada, yada, yada. Right. I would put probably 80% of the deficiencies the Flyers are having on the core because when they were struggling, it was the core members that weren't showing up, weren't scoring. JVR didn't have a point until I think 8 games, I believe 7-8 games into the season. Giroux had an assist here and there. Voracek, aside from that 2-goal night in Edmonton, didn't really do much either. They're coming on as of late, which is great to see, but it's the consistency. It's the fact that I wrote that article on JVR about how he scores in spurts, which Bleacher Report butchered that title. I don't know why the hell they would have changed it. But anyways, he scores in spurts. It's you go 3 games, 4 games where he has like 7 points. And then you go 7 or 8 games where he's held off the score sheet or he's got an assist here and there, or a goal, whatever. It comes in spurts. Right. I would like to see much more consistency out of these guys that are labeled core members than we're getting right now.
Well, and you know what? You won't see this on any score sheet, but whenever a team is struggling, you need to count on those core members to be the ones who are continuing to lay it all on the line. And physically, it's noticeable that they are not going to give up until the final horn sounds. And those aren't the guys that we're seeing do that.
You're right.
I'm seeing Konechny just fight the entire time. He looks pissed on the bench. And you got Giroux, who I hate to take a knock on, just looks complacent.
Yeah. I will say that being a leader, like Giroux, being in the captain's spot, he's also meant to motivate these players. And I don't know how much of the success that guys like Konechny and Lindblom are having you could attribute to Giroux maybe lighting that spark, lighting that fire up under them. But I'm sure that something he said along the way, something that he's done along the way, Konechny or Lindblom looked at and thought about it, and they're like, okay, this is going to get me fired up. This is going to get me going.
Sure.
It's the things we don't see, the things in the locker room discussed over lunches, breakfast, dinner, whatever you want to call it, behind the scenes that we don't have access to because that's their lives. These guys are best friends off the ice, I'm sure. They all talk. They're talking hockey. You know that for sure. There's just things that fans won't be able to see that might contribute to other guys, not necessarily these core members, but these guys that, the role players, if you want to call them that. I don't know if I'd call Konechny that right now, but the guys
No.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and that's it's kind of like the changing of the guard. You're seeing these younger guys kind of becoming like that new core. Like you can kind of see them doing that. But what I like to think of it as, if you think of, let's just go Giroux and Voracek for a second.
Okay.
When you think of kind of a word that defines the Flyers teams under their leadership, what would you use?
A word to describe the leadership?
No.
Okay.
That defines the team under the years that they were kind of the leaders.
Whew. I mean, you could take this the wrong way, but I'd kind of say mundane.
Right. I was going to go with mediocre.
Yeah, another M word. But, it's just there's not been that one defining moment. Like you see every year, like just the other night, that GIF came along that all the Penguins fans were making fun of with Konechny on the bench pissed off. And they're like, oh, cry. And it's like, no. You kidding me right now? He's not crying. Like he's sitting there on the bench pissed off.
Right. Exactly.
That's the fire. That's what you want to see,
Right. And I think of the Edmonton Oilers and all those first-round draft picks that they had, and first overall picks that they had. Yeah. And I think it was Taylor Hall, but I'm not sure. But one of the guys said, after a while, you just get used to what the team is. And in that case was losers. I mean, they just stunk year after year. And it almost looks like Giroux and Voracek are just in this like mediocre plateau just because it's like all they know. Yeah. And maybe that's not all their fault, and I totally understand that. But you need to see more. Like, in order for this team to go to the next level, they need to be leaders on the ice. And they need to be producing points. But I just can't be seeing these moments where they kind of like hold back a little bit or kind of just throw in the towel when they're down 3-4 goals. That can't be happening.
That mindset, I could at least, and it's not, acceptable by any means, but I could at least understand it coming from a guy like Voracek. Voracek in his career has not been a part of much playoff success at all.
Right.
But you get to a guy like Giroux, his first year in the league, I believe it was his first year, they made the Cup Finals. It's like there needs to be a hunger. There needs to be a drive and a just veracity, and he needs to be tenacious. He needs to have that killer instinct and that thirst and that hunger to get back to that level, to get back to that Stanley Cup Final, finish the job. Because damn well that did not sit well with anyone on that team. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, him and I think JVR might be the only guys left from that team that made it to the Stanley Cup Finals.
I think you're right, yeah. I can't think anybody else who would have been there.
Yeah. And so it's like, when you've been there and you've tasted it and,
right.
You want more of it. And I don't see that. I don't see that with Giroux. I don't see it leaking through to the second tier type of guys. That needs to change. That hunger needs to be, that fire in everybody's eye needs to be there.
Right. I mean, and it's tough because, we've been pretty vocal that we love Giroux. As fans, we appreciate everything that he's been able to do for this franchise. But I'm Chuck Fletcher, and you go through this season and you don't reach the goal that you've set. You really need to start taking a look and going, are these guys a fit here anymore? Because this is the year that you can probably get away with selling Giroux or Voracek high, because it's only, one with Claude Giroux, right? It'll be only kind of like one down year where you could still get a decent amount back for them. If you just allow this decline to continue to happen, then you're stuck with a guy who's, making $8 million plus.
Now, is that the route you explore? Is that what's going to fix this so-called complacency with the core in Philadelphia?
Well, it would completely change the core in Philadelphia.
I mean, you think about it. You see these young guys like Konechny and Lindblom who are up and coming, who are putting points up and proving that they're going to be integral parts of this team moving forward. Is that a wake-up call to those guys that says, okay, none of our spots are safe. We need to, is that the shakeup that this team would need?
It's way too early to tell. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. I don't think that a guy like Voracek or Giroux can get traded during the season anyway. I think that these would be off-season trades, so you have a full year to figure this out. Yeah. It's way too early to tell. But if this team does not make the playoffs, clearly there's going to need to be a shakeup because we don't have the cap space that we did, right? And I don't necessarily know if it would be a message to guys like Konechny or Lindblom who at this point are carrying their own weight and then some. I think it's more of a message to the guys like JVR or maybe Ghost if he's still around. Those older guys that maybe aren't performing up to their expectations. Those are the ones that it's kind of like, all right, your spot is not safe here.
Yeah. And that's the kind of response that you would want from guys, especially like Ghost, because he's been underperforming. There's no two ways about it. That's
Right.
what you want. That's what you want that message to be moving forward, is that, hey, if that guy can get traded and I'm playing worse than him, my
Yep.
spot's anything but guaranteed right now.
Yeah. And, to be clear, and I think we can almost put a bow on it at this point, but, I don't think that they need to do anything drastic, nor do I think they can do anything drastic. This team is, they're back and forth, they're up and down, but it's still really early. It's not like they're winless at this point. When they look good, they look pretty darn good. So that would be way too drastic of a measure to take at this point.
Agreed.
But I think that it's something, where could be revisited come off season, depending on what this team can do.
I agree. And that's the bow.
There we go.
Yeah. So, excuse me. If we are going to progress, we get to our Wait What segment. And for those of you who do not know about the Wait What segment, how? First off. Second off, this is where we take something that we saw, something that we read, something we might have experienced, and it's in the title. You look at it and you go, wait, what? So this week, John, I led last week with my embarrassing Christopher Robin costume. I'm going to let you lead this week so I have the chance to make fun of you this time.
Okay. Well, mine is a little different this time. It's actually a human being.
Oh.
And it's hockey related. So I'm sitting watching the game last night, and if anybody's listened to this show before, I live in New York, right? So I don't get the Flyers games locally. I do have the package, but last night's game was on the NHL network. So the package blacks it out. And it's on the NHL network, which is fine. I have the NHL network. And they're playing the Hockey Night in Canada airing of the game because it's against the Maple Leafs. Mm-hmm. And I mean, for the most part, that program's pretty good. I always like Elliot Friedman. I think they had some really good guys there. But my wait, what has to do with Don Cherry? What in the holy hell is that guy still doing on a television? And I'm not even talking about his opinions or like the big old jerk thing that he said. He looks like he's going to just have a breakdown. He's talking, he makes no sense. The guy standing next to him has no idea what's going on. It's just a lot of horror from, there's in the box and then and it's like, there's a lot of great people in this business. Why is he doing this? It's so bad. I was sitting on my couch, not even a Canadian, right? So it's not like he's representing my nation or anything like that, but I was embarrassed and uncomfortable for the gentleman. I was sitting there going, they got to cut this really soon. And even the guy next to him's like, all right there, Don, we got to keep moving. They're cutting your time, Don. When are they going to take him out and tell him to ride out in the sunset, man? He's done. Woo-hoo.
Everybody thought that, what is it, Rogers, I guess, is the company? Yeah. Everybody thought they weren't renewing his contract and bringing him back this year before the season started, and that ended up being a farce, and they ended up bringing him back anyway. And everybody got so excited. Everybody's like, Don Cherry's gone. Don Cherry's gone. This is great. Right. And he comes back on the show, and he's like, surprise, I'm here.
You know what he reminds me of? Like a early 90s WCW just like announcer, or not announcer, like commentator.
Yeah.
Like, you ever listen to go back to like the early Monday Nitros and just the amount of intensity that they're speaking with, but they're really talking about nothing. They're like, oh man, he just walked into the ring. Did you see that first step? Like, that's what Don Cherry reminds me of. I'm puzzled by him.
You know what he reminds me of?
No. What?
Herpes.
Damn.
We thought he was gone, and then he's back, and it's like, oh, crap, I
don't know, man. Herpes might be more pleasant than watching that guy. Whew.
I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know from experience.
No, me
it's
neither.
Not fun, though.
All right. Well, that's your wait, what? No.
That is not my weight one. I've got two, and I'm just going to hit on them real quick.
Okay.
So I'm getting my hair cut yesterday, and I go to this place right down the street from where I live. It's just easy to get there, and they know what I like, and usually the same lady cuts my hair every time. And I checked in online because you can do that now, which is pretty nifty. It says it's going to be a 45-minute wait. I'm like, this sucks, but I'm going to do it anyway. Get there, there's like these 3 families in front of me, and I'm like, oh, Jesus, like this is going to suck. And a couple kids, and kids are, no big deal. None of them are screaming and kicking or whatever at that time. And then this happened. The kid got called back, and it was like probably a 3-year-old kid. Sits down in the barber chair, starts screaming. I'm like, all right, well, guess I'm getting one spot closer to getting my hair cut. I'm getting all excited, and the lady that was set to cut his hair, just you could see it on her face. She's like, oh, geez, here we go.
Right.
The mom and the dad both were there. The mom sits down in the barber's chair, grabs a hold of the kid, and is like bear hugging him. And this woman's trying to cut his hair. And I have never heard a child scream this loud or this just like it was shrill. And
in public.
Yeah, in public. And it just coursed through my veins. Like, I cringed. And then the dad's trying to, like, control this kid's arms. They literally got up out of the barber chair, and they're holding on to this kid. And I'm like, just take the kid home, put a bowl over his head, and call it a day. Like, like we used to do back in the day. What was your buddy in the bathroom stall charging $5 a haircut?
Yeah, shit, man. My wife, she cuts my hair now.
Yeah,
she's not a hairdresser. We just bought a buzzer, and I'm just like, I don't know, 4.
That's all it takes, But I was just like, this is ridiculous, and I ended up getting called back right before this kid finished, and he was decent for the last like 2 minutes, but good God. And the other one I just want to touch on real quick. As many of you know, I announced a while back, my wife and I are expecting. We announced today that it is in fact going to be a baby boy. So
John Patrick Bob.
Yes, in fact, it is John Patrick Bob. We are going to name the child after my co-host here. We announced it was a boy. I'm excited, obviously, just thrilled because it's a little mini me, and good Lord knows that the world needs another Derek Bob.
Oh, yeah.
We announced it on Twitter. Everybody's like, congrats, dude. We're so happy for you. And I'm like, thank you. Like, I'm genuinely appreciative of all of you that have reached out and said, congratulations. I thank you so much. Then we get one guy. And I don't know it verbatim, but it was pretty short, so I'm pretty sure I get the gist of it. He goes, congrats.
Yep.
Are you going to keep it? So I told him, thank you, we are. And then John brings up, he's like, you should have told him it's going to the highest bidder.
Right. I don't know. What are you interested in giving me, man?
I'm like, is this a question you typically ask somebody who's expecting a child? Like,
I'd like to think he was being funny.
I hope.
It's hard to have that kind of humor when you don't know the person. Like, that's a joke that maybe I give to you.
Yeah, it's a joke I would expect from you.
I had no idea who this guy was. That was pretty funny, though.
Oh, dude, if the person that said that is listening, I hope you were kidding. It was funny. I'll take it in that. I'll take it in stride there. If you're not kidding,
DM us with the price.
Yes, let us know.
Right.
I say highest bidder, but we'll haggle a little bit here.
Right. Yeah, we'll see.
All right. Well, that wraps up our 40th. I think this might actually be our 40th episode.
I stopped counting.
I did too. Oh, it is what it is at this point. We're having fun with it. But folks, before we go, we have 2 announcements to make. 1, we are still open to advertising you, a friend, a family member's company. If there are any type of advertising needs that you would have or a friend, family member would have, please feel free to email us. Our email is in our Twitter bio. You can also DM us, whatever way is best for you. Let us know. We'll reach out. We can work something out. We'd love to advertise for that company. So please feel free to get a hold of us, whichever way is easiest for you. Second off, this contest that we just had that had Ben on this evening, I should say, we're going to roll with it, and we're going to have another question based on this episode coming out tomorrow, Monday. So today, I'm assuming most of you are listening. We will ask that question. The first person to answer it correctly is going to end up recapping the games with us, much like Ben Melusky did today with us. So be on the lookout for that, and hopefully we get a good turnout. I think that, it went really well today. I'm hoping that trend continues.
Yeah, that was good.
But for now, John, please let these good folks at home, on the train, on the car, whatever, know where they can find you on Twitter.
Well, I hope they're not on the car.
Oh,
if you're on the car, get in it, please.
Yeah, don't get arrested trying to listen to us. Get in the car.
Yeah, so you can find me at Twitter at PodStreetGove. I remembered it this time. You can find my work at Philly Sports Network. You can find me on this show. You can find me on a car every once in a while, and that's about it.
I'm not going to live that one down for a few weeks at least. As for me,
you're good.
As for me, you can find me at PodStreetBob. That's BOBB. You can find my work on Philadelphia Sports Network, much like John's. And you, as always, can find us at PodSTBullies on Twitter. And you can find our podcast on any major, even minor, like Podmuncher, I guess, podcasting.
Call that minor ever again.
It's major in John's mind, so we'll leave it at that. But anyways, we'll leave this. As I always leave it, let's go Flyers.
Bye now.